Life is a chain of events, so inspect each link. Hi, I'm John, and welcome to Philosopher's Corner. For those of you who don't know me, I graduated from West Point in '98 with a degree in philosophy, and I was an ex-Army pilot, and I worked on war staff, and I got out and went into stand-up comedy in 2005, and I've been in the arts and entertainment ever since, which is really an extension of my philosophical training that I received at West Point, predominantly under Dr. Lou Poyman, who was a great philosopher, R.I.P., Dr. Poyman. And, you know, philosophy has stuck with me. It's a system of thinking that helps you approach systems of thinking. Philosophy comes from the Greek philo and sophi, basically meaning lover of wisdom. And it has not steered me wrong this life. It has confounded me and done some other things and put me on some circuitous routes to the truth and wisdom, but it has never failed me as long as I've kept at it. And one of the very fundamental thought processes of it that helped lead me to many truths, which I was ignorant of when I began my truthful search, was the fact that, in fact, life is a series of events. They're causal. There's cause and effect, and you can inspect each linkage forward or backwards. Which was funny enough. I remember when Dr. Poyman back in school had me write a paper about cause and effect, and I was so contrarian that I wrote that cause and effect didn't exist, and I cited multi-dimensional reasons as to why cause and effect didn't exist. I cited nonlinear time as a proof that cause and effect didn't exist. Turns out I was wrong, but I wrote it really well, so he gave me a decent grade. But here I am to let you know that, in fact, life is a chain of events, and we can't inspect each link, which is really what any form of philosophy sort of comes down to. When you get into philosophy, you really want to get down into you want to get into the procession of the logic of things. Now, good logic won't always lead you to the true answer, but good logic is the place to start. Because if you have bad logic, you can immediately throw out that train of thought. So the linkages from one event or one thought or one principle to the next need to have a logical coherence, right? And that's sort of how we begin to inspect these chains of causation. So cause and effect, they exist, and they seem to be, and many people say that it is, the fact that that is what creates the world, essentially, are these chains of causation. So you have a cause, and then you have an effect, right? In its simplest form. You have one moment, and then you have some connection to the next moment. And then that goes from there on, ad infinitum, out to infinity and beyond, as Buzz Lightyear might say. Cause and effect. Now, different philosophers, they have their different theories on what goes into the cause, what goes into the effect. They want to see, they're trying to, like famously Immanuel Kant says everything's about intention. So, they're trying to figure out, how do you influence the cause and effect? Like what are the mechanisms of it? But right now, it's just good to know that cause and effect exist. Something happens and it causes another thing to exist, right? And that's sort of the basis of all areas of inquiry. Even when you go into regular hardcore science, what scientists are really asking is, what caused that? Right? Like basically every scientist, all they're really ever asking is, what causes this thing, this phenomenon? What causes this? And they can come into it scientific method style, and they have an idea about it, a hypothesis, and they go, I have this idea of why this thing happens, right? Or why this thing doesn't happen, but it's all in relation to cause and effect. And they have an idea, and then they create an experiment, and they go, I think this thing is happening because of this. And they go, oh, well, let's create an experiment to see if that thing that I think is causing this effect is in fact the cause of this effect. And then they run a bunch of iterations of an experiment, and they get the results, and then they run the results, and they go, oh, well, this is a very serious list of results of this thing that I think was happening. And it may very well be a serious subject, or it may very well be a silly subject. But either way, they get a list of their results of their experiment, and then they bring it back and they compare it to their original hypothesis, their idea. And they go, oh, well, does this match up with this? You know, and then whatever the analysis of that is creates the next iteration, right? So it loops back onto itself of like, okay, cool. Had an idea, made an experiment, got the data. Now we're comparing it to the initial hypothesis, and now we have this analysis. And with that analysis, we're actually going to go back into the same loop and do it again. Like, okay, well, now that we have this analysis, this information based on the idea in the experiment, like, let's run through again, you know, with adjustments if we want, right? And then it goes and goes and goes and goes until in the hardcore scientific world, they get the data and the idea to a particular level of statistical certainty, right? And based on whatever that level of statistical measure that they're using is, will tell them either satisfies their inquiry, or it continues to drive the inquiry, or it takes the inquiry into an entirely different chain of events, essentially. But they never leave the chain of events, right? Because causation. Because cause and effect, in its simplest form, cause and effect. Now, interestingly, some people will backwards engineer. They'll say, we have an effect, we'd like to know what the cause is. But the important thing to remember is that they're always operating on the philosophical principle of cause and effect, of the linkage, of the causation of things, right? It never varies. It doesn't matter the scale of the cause and effect. It doesn't matter the timing of the cause and effect. It doesn't matter whether it's in the physical realm, or in the spiritual realm, or in the quantum realm, which is pretty much both. It sticks. It continues. It's a constant. It's when you zoom in to a very, very, very small level, you can see cause and effect happening on chemical levels, microscopic levels, quantum levels, you know, molecular levels, atomic levels. And then when you come back out into the biological realm, it's easy. Physics is only a description of mechanical causes and effects. There's gravity, so gravity is cause, and all the effects are anything that gravity affects. Or there's something has mass. Having mass is a cause in and of itself. Something has mass. Well, what's the effect of something having mass? Well, number one is that it displaces things in the reality, and then it has effects, right? And there's so many different ways to analyze the different effects. I mean, just as a seemingly stationary object, its cause is that it's there, and then the effect is that you notice it exists, it has displacement, it has some sort of radiation, it has a half-life, it has some sort of electromagnetic signature. It catalyzes people thinking about it, it catalyzes people talking about it. It like does all these different things, right? And that's before anybody even determines any sort of function. Because then when somebody determines a function for something, let's say you have a boulder, right? Let's say you have a boulder, and it's just sitting there, and it seemingly has little to no effect, which is improper perception. Everything has an effect. It's sitting there, right? Well, the moment somebody determines that that boulder would be perfect to carve down or sculpt into a piece of furniture or a piece of art, all of a sudden, that seemingly like ineffectual boulder is now going to have a tremendous effect. Would you be surprised to know that boulder turned into, the Venus de Milo? Okay, now what's the effect of the Venus de Milo? It's not just a boulder anymore now, is it? And when you go back and you go, okay, that's fine. That rock got turned into the Venus de Milo, and you can literally look back like the blockchain all the transactions that occurred in that linkages of cause and effect, from where it's the Venus de Milo back to it being a boulder, right? And the cool thing about being in this particular world is that that's not the only series of causations that occurred in that particular journey of that boulder to becoming the Venus de Milo. Because in there are all the other things, like, for instance, just the artist who created it, right? The artist at some point had their own cause and effects that led them to this particular material, that led them to thinking about the creation of this piece of art, right? And so the cause and effects are many, many, many layered when they come into real world use. Extremely sophisticated. That's why I think it's helpful to look at the atomic level of the reality, because when you look at the atomic level, you basically have all these little pieces of energy with their own little electromagnetic orbits. You know, they have their nucleuses and they have their little orbits with their electrons and everything. And basically all of them are finding ways to electromagnetically link into each other, right? That's basically what matter is. Matter is a series of atomic molecules that have found linkages with other atomic bodies, right? And they've linked up, however they link up, whatever that's like their electron fields have like conjoined orbits. But basically when you like really simplify it, they're basically like chain links together, you know, and every once in a while you get a valence electron that comes in and can bond to whatever and change the whole structure of a thing, which is a crazy thing, but that's also cause and effect, right? Built in. But basically, like, any piece of matter is really just like chicken wire chain links all linked together, and how they link together has an effect on the type of matter that is presented in the reality. And then those matters get linked up in different ways, right? And that's where it gets sort of more traditionally philosophical. You go, okay, it's not just the biological mechanical linkages and the physics linkages and causations that are at play here. Then you get down to these like astral, spiritual, intention, Immanuel Kant sort of areas, and into other realms. But you find that they are still operating on the base principle of cause and effect. Right? Now, people will try to drill in to figure out if you can alter the effect through your cause. You know, you put intention, you put this, you put that. There's a lot of theories. You know, art really experiments with cause and effect, really, of like, you know, because if you think about every painter ever, right? Cause and effect in the painting world. You have a canvas, you have paint or some kind of material. You have a canvas, and you have some kind of material on the canvas. But that's what every artist, that's what every painter starts with. It's just like same blank canvas, same set of materials to put some colors or images onto the canvas to achieve an effect, right? So there's a cause and effect. And on the philosophical level, Picasso's the same as like your amateur down the street. It's just some person with a canvas that wants to put something on it to achieve an effect on a person presumably is going to come to view it. It's cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And it doesn't matter if it's business, it doesn't matter if it's art, it doesn't matter if it's your personal life. It's literally just a fundamental building block of reality, all the way from the mental plane to the biological animal plane. It's just cause and effect. And so, as a philosopher, it's fun to be able to view the world with clarity in that respect, because then you can examine each of the links. You go cause and effect. Okay, I can examine the links. And when you get into examining the links, there's like so much energy in those links, because in those links is where the moment exists. When people talk about being in the moment, a lot of what they're saying is you should really like become aware of the cause and effect, because it's a non-stop occurrence in the moment. Your emotions are coming, you're breathing, you're thinking, like all these. Really, when we're describing life, we're describing the sensation of being in the moment, of experiencing cause and effect. And furthermore, a lot of people, as we become self-aware, want to find a way to harness the cause and effect to create the effects that we believe would please us. That's a lot of the human condition, is just coming to the realization that cause and effect exists, and then when that moment becomes a fundamental understanding of the experience that we're engaged in, and it's not just personal to us, that it's universal to the environment that we're in, the next logical step for most people is, okay, well, how do I achieve the effect that I desire? And that comes with being authentic. Having authentic vibrations of your desires, of what you're trying to affect, the emotional states you want to achieve, the physical states that you want to be in. Essentially, most people that I've met through life who are actually at peace have just come to clarity on the chain of cause and effects. Usually it happens in a general sense before they apply it personally, but sometimes it works personally, then they apply it to the general. But most people I've met who have achieved peace in their life just have a clear understanding of cause and effect and what their cause is in their personal field and the effect that they're getting back from the cause of their personal field. And most people, when they've achieved that balance, it doesn't really matter if a person, to me, when I met them, it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor or blue collar or white collar. Like, the particulars don't really matter. I've met people who, like, you know, they've paid a dear price to get there. You know, they've become, you know, infirmed or handicapped or poor or unloved or whatever that forced them in a hard focus to figure out the cause and effect in a very personal way. I've met people who've sort of like eased through and they've lived a really good life with like relatively, you know, few obstacles or real tragedy, and they've also achieved clarity on the cause and effect. But either way, when they get there, that seems to be the thing that gives them the most peace, is clearly seeing the cause and effect. No matter how simple or how sophisticated a person wants to make that understanding for themselves. You know, I think that's why in the monastic tradition, when people renounce worldly things and they go, you know, into the Buddhist monastery or wherever, they're really just trying to simplify all of the different causes coming out of them so that they can get a period of time to achieve this clarity by simplifying the amount of perceived causes coming out of them so that they can narrow down the effects, so they don't have to chase a million different things, so that they can actually make it easier to become self-aware and see what causes they are affecting. There's many other reasons why they do it, but I think that's one of the main benefits of them doing renunciation. You know, celibacy, poverty, all those types of things, just removing themselves from the larger world of uncontrollable cause and effects. They're essentially monasteries, they're essentially spiritual scientists going in initially to satisfy for themselves the hypothesis that they are a cause and they can have an effect on the world, and they want to go to a place where those extraneous stimulants and causes and effects have been removed as much as humanly possible. And then they're also in an environment with a long history of people doing it and figuring it out. And once they get initiated into it and they start to get some results that they can validate, then they can compare them to the catalog of information and perspectives that have come before them in these sort of repositories of spiritual and philosophical wisdom. Whereas a person who is trying to become adept at that in the real world has to deal with a myriad of extraneous cause and effects over which they have no control over. And it can really make it much more difficult to find clarity, to get to clarity, if that makes sense. But the cause and effect is really what everybody is studying. And at a certain level, once you have the clarity on the causes and effects, then that's what allows you to ascend the vision into a much like bigger picture of what's going on, into less sort of like what feels like tedious examination of cause and effect and linkages, into what seems to be a much more sort of enjoyable space of a bigger picture and sort of bigger items. But none of it is really possible until a person understands the cause and gets clarity on cause and effect, and they can start to see it in different avenues, different dimensions, different respects with different outcomes. And then you can start to attribute more sophisticated systems of thought, because you got to realize that like every system of thought is going to be based on that. Even things where seemingly disparate things, there's never not a cause and effect. Things can seem that they appear out of nowhere, or that they're non-linear, or this or that, and to your perception they may be totally true. But just because something comes out of a different timeline or a different dimension, or it comes out of a place that's outside of your own awareness or whatever, just exceeds your particular perception, which is easy to do because none of us are omniscient, it's always good to keep in mind the cause and effect is always in play, and that if one needs to, they can backtrack the links of the causes and effects back to whatever the source is. And sort of in a philosophically forensic manner, that's incredibly valuable. There may be nothing more valuable than to know that cause and effects exist, because then you can sort of surf those cause and effect algorithms forensically wherever you want. And when I get into deep states of meditation, that's precisely what occurs. When I get a download or a transmission, or I want to like deeply analyze something, cause and effect is the forensic chain that is there, and it's real, and it's been validated by so many people throughout the millennia that it is the way it is. It's a fundamental law. So going into philosophy, get very comfortable with cause and effect, achieve clarity on it, and just know that when I speak in these simple, like sort of the vaguer philosophical terms, that's the higher level of looking into the more tedious daily activities. We can populate these things with a tremendous amount of examples, but we don't want to make it unclear. So cause and effect is real, and we can examine the links. So thanks for hanging out at Philosopher's Corner. Until next time, I hope you enjoy all your cause and effect.